this work for many years through our teaching strategies and our content. And then we want to take some time at the end to review some tools and strategies and resources that might be helpful to you in your classroom practice. So before we get started, I'd just like to ask you guys to take a minute or two to brainstorm, what skills do your students need to have or develop to be successful at work and in new careers? So, and you can think very broadly about this, like types of academic skills, soft skills, communication, interpersonal skills. So just go ahead and post your ideas in the chat box now. So I already see some coming in. I'm going to give folks a few more minutes.
Be sure and notice there's the general chat, and then there's a chat box on the bottom left for this question. And just pointing that out because there'll be a number of different times that we ask for your input, and there'll be different chat pods for those questions.
Great. So I see a lot of folks mentioning communication skills and communication competence, problem solving, teamwork, and independence, critical thinking, organizational skills, and punctuality. I see a number of folks mentioning teamwork, reliability, and interpersonal skills. Leadership skills, I really like that. Time management, communication again, respecting coworkers, making contributions, soft skills, cultural expectations. A couple of folks have mentioned storytelling skills for interviews. I think that's, really interesting. And I see more time management skills. So this is a great list that you guys have come up with, and you've already helped us begin to answer the question of what are employability skills. And so I just want to dig into the research on employability skills a little bit to give you context. Employability skills are essentially defined as the general skills and knowledge necessary for success in the labor market at all employment levels and in all sectors. And by that, and sometimes we've heard them referred to as 21st century skills, soft skills, non-cognitive skills. But I think the key thing about employability skills is really that they are cross-cutting, and that they're required for success in a labor market, really regardless of what level of work someone does or what sector they work in. And it do include many of the skills you've already brainstormed around communication and critical thinking. So why are these skills so important is a big question. And essentially, today's employers are looking for workers who possess employability skills. Over the years, there's been an increase really in the types of jobs that require these types of employability skills. The Pew Research Center found that jobs requiring stronger social skills, interpersonal skills, communication and management skills have increased by 83% since 1980. So that demand for those employability skills in a workplace that's moving away from more of a factory model into an information skills model means that skills like judgment and decision-making, communications, analysis, and administration are actually predicted to be the 4 most in-demand competencies in the labor market. What's sort of interesting about that also is that when you ask workers about the types of skills that they rely on most in their jobs, their experience echoes what economists and researchers are saying around needing to rely on their interpersonal skills, their critical thinking, and their communication skills, both oral communication and written communication. So what does this mean for us as adult educators? I think understanding the types of skills that employers are looking for and the skills that our adult students need to be career ready can really guide us as we design our curriculum and our classroom strategies. There's an increased emphasis, I think we're all aware of this in adult ed, on building and strengthening the connection between adult education and workforce development. And the employability skills framework really gives us an opportunity to identify the skills that we're already practicing with students in our classroom, as well as pointing us to the areas we might develop further in our curriculum. So what are the employability skills? They've been developed into an employability skills framework, which advances essentially a unified set of skills that cuts across the course development and education sectors. It built this employability skills framework based on an inventory of existing employability skills and standards assessments, and was developed by the U.S. Department of Education with input and really guided by career and technical educators, adult educators, workforce development, and business professionals, along with 12 different federal agencies. So we're gonna dig in a little bit to this framework, and I'd like to suggest that if you have your handout available, the employability skills one-pager that we sent you beforehand, you might want to look at it and take notes as we go.
And you can download that from your screen right now, and under the handouts you can see the employability skills framework there.
Great, thanks, Marion. So at the core of the bullseye, the framework essentially organizes itself into 3 broad categories. The first that I'm looking at off to my right is effective relationships, and those are the skills that enable individuals to interact effectively with clients and coworkers and supervisors. The second set of skills on the bottom, broadly categorized as workplace skills, are the skills employees need to successfully perform work tasks. And the third set of skills, and I think this is where as adult educators we are most familiar and most of our work, is really around applied knowledge and the thoughtful integration of academic knowledge and skills, and in this context put to practical use in the workplace. So the
Amy,
yeah.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Your audio is just a little bit choppy. I think it's because of your bandwidth. So I'm just going to encourage you. We don't have a lot of control over that. So I'm just going to encourage you to speak slowly so that your audio has time to catch up with you. Thanks.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. So the 3 categories, effective relationships, workplace skills, and applied knowledge, along the inner ring, are then further defined in an outer ring and in the outer rim. So effective relationships, in the effective relationships category, you see that there are interpersonal skills and personal qualities. The workplace skills, we see technology use, systems thinking, communication skills, information use, and resource management. And then the third category in applied knowledge has applied academic skills and also critical thinking. It's a really broad range of skills, as you can see, that are considered employability skills, and many of the categories that brainstormed in the beginning are on this wheel. Practitioners have made a few important observations about this framework that I just want to point out. One is that there's an overlap between these skills and they're often mutually supportive and interlocking. So for example, interpersonal skills and communication skills are obviously, go together. You have, in order to relate and have effective relationships, you need to have communication skills. Or information use and critical thinking, for example, where in order to sort of critically think and problem solve, you have to be able to use and sort and analyze information. So sometimes another question that gets raised about this framework is, why are communication skills in the workplace category, and not in effective relationships? And I think in this instance, it's really the difference in the purpose for the communication. So interpersonal communications are really about relationship building and conflict resolution, whereas this is communication in a workplace category, which is what do you need to do communications-wise to do your job or to fulfill the demands of your role at work. But in reality, communication is needed in all of these categories for success. The other thing I just want to point out is that some of the examples you provided in the beginning fit into these categories even when they're called something different. So a lot of you mentioned teamwork, and that would be considered in the employability skills framework as an interpersonal skill. And some of you mentioned punctuality and taking personal responsibility, and again, those will be categorized as personal qualities in the framework. So let's take a closer look at how each of these categories are further defined for a minute. Okay, here we go. So effective relationships are comprised of interpersonal skills, which include understanding teamwork and working well with others, exercising leadership, resolving conflict, and respecting individual differences. And personal qualities include things like demonstrating responsibility and self-discipline, some of the characteristics that you guys mentioned. It also includes being flexible, being able to work independently, demonstrating a willingness to learn and a positive attitude, and also taking responsibility for professional growth and taking initiative. So before I go any further, I would like to ask you, do you have some of these goals? Do you share some of these goals for the students in your classroom? And which ones are they? Which ones do you also try to develop with your students? You can take the poll, which I think will be appearing in the next slide, and check off all the skills, the effective relationship skills that you practice. Okay. It's coming up now. Great, you guys are right on it. Skills that you practice either explicitly or implicitly as part of your teaching strategies in the classroom with your students. So we see a lot of teamwork and working with others, also respecting individual differences, demonstrating responsibility and self-discipline, demonstrating a willingness to learn and working independently. So you, through this poll, are already sort of showing all of the skills that you're developing now with students, either explicitly through your lessons or implicitly through your teaching strategies. This is a great, great list. I like to see also that folks are about half of you are reporting that you're trying to help students exercise leadership in the classroom, and also to adapt and show some flexibility, which are really important employability skills. Great. Thank you for that list. So we're going to go back. Vicki, you can, if you can, go ahead and close this poll and open up the slides again. That would be great. Thank you. So the next big bucket of workplace skills. And there's a lot to unpack in this category. And I see Rona asked, where are the hard skills categorized? So you might begin to see some of them here. And also as we talk more about the applied knowledge section. So in workplace skills, the category of research management, which is about managing time and money and materials and people, which is interesting to think about in terms of a classroom practice. The second big category, information use, really our students need to be able to locate and organize and use and analyze information as well as communicate it for a purpose. Communication skills are, pretty clear and straightforward, listening actively, communicating both in writing and verbally. But I also find it interesting that they've placed in communication skills observation, careful observation. Systems thinking, which is something that was new for me, is really about understanding and using systems and monitoring them and improving them. So some work example of that might be, someone who's monitoring a team or a set of processes at work, but in the academic context, systems thinking is oftentimes applied to scientific concepts or often to solve problems like in public health where you have to look across a broad spectrum of ideas and systems to understand how to solve, let's say, the health and wellness of a community. And then the last one, which is increasingly important, is technology use and understanding and using technology. So which of these skills do you already practice with students in classes? I'm going to ask you to take a minute. Oh, I like what Chris says, systems thinking equals meta-awareness. So thank you, Chris. So can you take a minute to list from this list of workplace skills, which skills you already practice with students in your classes? You can go ahead and put it in the general chat. See folks typing. So using information and communicating information, Ruzana. Leslie's referring to technology skills and developing technology skills with her students. Teresa asks for students to locate information. So here we're getting some good lists here, organizing and analyzing information, all the communication skills, locating and comprehending and conveying information, and also information in writing. I appreciate that you guys are making the distinction. Communicating verbally, resource management. The BAS teachers are talking about resource management, which I really love. More technology. Online teaching invokes a lot of the skills listed. Yes, so interesting. We're getting some folks talking about teaching strategies which may help to develop some of these skills. Managing time and materials. Great. Observing information. So you guys are already, doing a lot of work around developing employability workplace skills, which is really terrific. Conveying information in writing, active listening. That's great. Terrific list. I'm going to wait for one or two more comments. Careful observation. I like that, Josephine. And comprehending oral and written materials. Great. Terrific. Okay. And the third section that we're going to move to on the wheel, thanks everybody for those great comments, is applied knowledge. And this is the area of employability skills that I think we're most probably familiar with because it encompasses academic skills, reading and writing, our math and science, and using scientific principles and procedures, and also the critical thinking that I think we're all, seeking to develop our students. So I find that using this framework is a great tool for identifying those skills and identifying kind of the full set of skills and making connections between the teaching and learning that we're already doing and workforce preparation and making that more explicit. And I think as adult educators, it's become more important for us to be able to tell that story and say, the work that I'm doing in my classroom is developing their academics and their English language and math skills, but it's also developing these very concrete employability skills. So before moving on, I just want to ask if there are any questions about the skills. Let me go back to that slide for a minute. Are there any questions about these skills, or did any of the skills surprise you? Okay, I see a few folks typing, so I'm going to wait. Okay, right. Sachiko, I hope I said your name right. You'd like to learn more about systems thinking. Jen also says systems thinking. Dee Dee says that's a new term for her. Can I explain systems thinking again? Yes, Layla, I hope I'm saying your name right. I think that that's one that I was also and remain curious about because it does feel new to me and kind of points to a direction in my own adult ed work that we can explore further. So I can explain systems thinking a little bit, which is that, and I think someone earlier mentioned that it was sort of a meta thinking, and it's really looking at systems, like especially in science, to solve problems and think critically about like how you would solve a problem or make things more efficient at work. So you guys are saying the practical application of ideas for systems thinking, yes. How would you determine integrity, personal qualities? That's a great question from the BAS teachers. How do you determine integrity, and certainly how do you like assess or measure something like that? Stella says, I'm so glad to see that applied academic skills are part of an employability skills framework, and I really appreciate that, Stella, because I think sometimes when we talk about workforce preparation or workforce development, critical academic skills that are really, the foundation and part of the interlocking set of skills that everybody needs to do well in their job and well in their career often don't get the kind of equal mention and attention that they need. Great. Thank you guys so much. Those are terrific comments and questions. So I'd like to spend some time, you guys have already talked about how, what types of employability skills you're already working on in your classes, either implicitly through your teaching strategies or explicitly through a lesson plan. And I'd like us to take a look together now at how how to apply or how to take the lens of the employability skills framework and analyze a lesson. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, we're going to watch a short video of a Minnesota instructor, George Schooley, who's facilitating a nonfiction reading lesson on birth order with his high-level ESL class. So just to give you some context, this video starts sort of midway through the lesson, and you should know that the instructor has already done a pre-reading activity with the students where they've grouped themselves by their own birth order, so that there's a group of firstborn students, a group of middle children, and a group of youngest children. And they've brainstormed the benefits and drawbacks of the birth order as a first step in the lesson. And they've also made predictions about the reading which they're about to do and you're about to watch on birth order theory and how it might influence personality. So I'm going to ask you, as you watch the video, to use your second handout, which we sent to you and which is down here in your handout under the Employability Skills Video Observation handout. And what I'd like to do is ask you if your last name starts with an A through J, to focus on the affect relationship skills only and observe for those skills in the video on page 1. If your last name starts with a K through an R, you're going to look at the workplace skills specifically, look for the workplace skills in the video, and those are on page 2 of your handout. And S through Z, with a last name S through Z, are going to be looking for the applied knowledge skills on page 3. And I'd like to ask you to not only say if you observed that workplace skill being developed in George Schooley's classroom, but where did you see it? What were the students doing? So Vicki, can you help us get to the video?
Yes, absolutely. So, so what we're going to have you do is click on the link. Don't do it quite yet, but the link is available directly on the screen here. When you do, it will open in a new window. So once you have viewed the video, we're going to ask you to come back to the webinar room, which will remain an open tab in your browser. So once you go to the video, or click on this, it will take you to the video, and then come back. And once you come back, there will be instructions on the screen when you do come back to let us know that you're back in. If for some reason that link is not working for you, if you haven't already done so, please be sure to download the handout that is in the pod down below that is entitled Viewing Video in a New Browser Window, and that gives you an option B, which is to copy and paste the link into a new tab, and that will also allow you to keep the webinar browser open as well. Okay, so as of now, please go ahead and click on the video link, and it will take you to the video. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes.
So some of you, I think, are finishing up watching your videos, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hand when you come back so we know that you've rejoined us. And you can also begin to use the chat box below that corresponds to the skill category you were assigned to note any of the skills you observe being practiced, and if you can offer a description, a little description of what the students were doing to practice that specific skill, that would be great. Great, so a lot of you are coming back in now. I see a lot of hands going up. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to type in what you observed, the skills you observed in your category, effective relationships, workplace skills, or applied knowledge, and what you saw the students doing when they were practicing those skills. I'm going to give folks another few minutes. I see a lot of people are typing. Sorry, Karin. I'm sorry you weren't able to access the video. We can try to send you the link, I think, after the webinar so you can have access to it. Okay. I see you guys are still typing, but I'm going to go ahead and please finish your typing and your thoughts. In the effective relationships category, you guys observed the students practicing respecting individual differences and working well together. Leslie says the higher level students were helping the lower level students, and I think that's great, very well observed. Chris says having group activity promotes most of the interpersonal skill development, which I think is absolutely right, working collaboratively in teams. Demonstrating integrity, Leslie says students have to justify their answer. They have to share ideas. Teresita says teamwork, a lot of folks mentioning teamwork. Students need to come up with a consensus on their decisions. Ruzana says, which I really love, so it's not just about working in groups, but it's really needing to negotiate and develop consensus. Also, folks are noting that negotiating and justifying, right, those are important. And taking initiative, asking people, right, the interviewing. Jesse's pointing out that the last activity in the end around needing to interview is helping people take the initiatives. Great. So let's look at the workforce skills a little bit. So folks are mentioning what they observed in the workforce skills category are analyzing and communicating information, specifically that students had to sort the adjectives and kind of explain and give a rationale for the category they were putting it in, which was absolutely right, and I think a terrific example of having to analyze and communicate and also persuade. The jigsaw technique with group problem solving, a lot of communication. Jesse's talking about students making careful observations, communicating verbally, also analyzing information, categorizing and evaluating it. Let's see, interviewing and organizing information. a lot of analysis going on here and communication in this workplace skills category. So let's take a look over at applied knowledge. So what were the applied knowledge skills that folks observed, and what were students doing to demonstrate that specific skill or practice that specific skill? So Stella says critical thinking, that they were evaluating the validity of the statements about personal traits. Exactly. Evaluating, Kirti says evaluating information in the reading and having to think critically about it. The BAS teachers talk about justifying their reasons for their decisions and categorizing them. Scientific skills, doing research and forming questions. That's absolutely terrific observation, that they have to make predictions and form questions and then use the information to validate. Certainly they were using reading skills, planning and organizing by completing and evaluating a table. Absolutely, those are definitely applied academic skills. Having to give reasons and follow up with the information, applying the information they were reading about to justify the rationale. And Jennifer Warren says reading, writing, random grouping to ensure higher and lower groupings, research and theory, thinking and questions. Great. This is terrific, you guys. So that was, that was terrific, and that was a 4-minute video, and all of those terrific employability skills were being practiced. So excellent, excellent observation. So Vicki, I think we can go on now. Thank you. So now that we've seen how George sort of does this, I did want to ask you guys just quickly to post in the general chat an example of from your own classrooms. Sorry, the presentation is loading right now. Here we go. So I want to ask you guys to give an example from your own classroom of a non-academic skill that you practice. So in this case, maybe not picking a reading, writing, and math, but it could be a reading, writing, and math lesson. Can you give an example of a specific activity that you do that helps students practice one of these employability skills that we've been talking about? And you can use the chat pod under the presentation or in the general chat, whichever works for you. I see folks are typing. Okay. So we're learning to type our emails into a keyboard in order to use our new Chromebooks. Great. So definitely a technology skill. Sarah says for critical thinking, she likes students to evaluate the resources when they're looking for things online. Right. I teach that not every place on the internet is reliable. Great. So assessing, being able to assess the information that you're receiving. Great. Workplace contextualized team problem-solving activities. Mimi says she uses the jigsaw to promote communications and to get students to work as a team to solve a question. Chris says when looking for job posts online, they have class discussions about it and potential job scams. Interesting. So there's definitely like a critical thinking aspect there. Workplace simulations and problem solving. Okay, so someone here says they're having their students call a supervisor and role play. A role play with a supervisor to excuse them for an absence. Some folks are doing digital literacy around effective email. Great. So a lot of technology here I see. Oh, this is interesting. Sachiko says she gives students a communication self-assessment rubric so that they can grade themselves on the time management, collaboration, active listening. Wow, that's terrific. So you're giving them a chance to really reflect on their skills as they're working on assignments. That's great. Role-playing job interviews, using feedback and communicative skills. Great. You guys are doing great things. I see a lot of technology, a lot of problem solving going on here. These are all terrific ideas. Negotiating to resolve conflicts, says Kirti. Brenda's talking about using TED Talks in order to answer questions and have agree or disagree with their classmates, which is terrific. Great. Thank you all so much. These are terrific. I'm going to keep going because I don't want to run out of time. So I want to quickly take a look at some employability skills in the adult ed classroom and different resources and strategies. And you guys have mentioned so many of them already, and really your sharing is helping us all see how dynamic and how many ways we can really develop employability skills with our students in an academic context. So one of the contexts that we're seeing increasingly in adult ed is an increased focus on building learners' background knowledge about careers and different workforce opportunities so that our students can make informed choices about their career path. Lesson plans can help students explore right fit options that match with their own interests, as well as job growth opportunities and specific opportunities in their communities. Using career and workforce materials, like some of you mentioned in the classroom, can provide a really good context for students' career discovery and goal setting, conducting workforce research, while also building those employability skills and academic skills that we're seeking to build in our classrooms. So one resource for that is preparing English learners for work and career pathways. And I want to just take a quick look at how they do that. So I'm not sure if any of you have used these resources before, ONET Online or the Occupational Outlook Handbook from the Department of Labor or similar websites, but these resources can help learners build their background knowledge about careers. And they provide a wealth of information about hundreds of jobs and quick facts and summaries identifying whether a field is growing or slowing down, and the types of information like salary and education that are needed to prepare for those jobs. The information on these sites is transferred really easily to a variety of types of learning activities that we can ask our students to do research. So this is one example of an activity where students are asked to identify a sector of interest, and then they use ONET and the Occupational Outlook Handbook to form groups and research 3 jobs. And this is an information gap activity, but they can also interview each other to fill in the information, and ultimately they're asked to prepare a poster with the research and using sample paragraphs on the left-hand side to develop an oral presentation on 2 of the jobs that the group researched. So this is an ESL activity that I think can be very effective in terms of exploring career and developing employability skills. Another example that is useful is creating brochures. So oftentimes doing activity-based or presentation-based activities are really helpful for students. In this instance, students are the teachers assessing students' prior knowledge in writing for a purpose, and then having them create a brochure. It was a fitness brochure for this class, but it really could be a brochure about anything, a public health topic or some kind of community information. And students choose their groups and the content for the brochure. This is an activity that happens over 4 days. They work to create an outline for the brochure. They identify group roles. They develop the brochure. And then they share their brochure with their class after working on it in a lab and using some design software. So they're using all the kind of employability skills in this one: interpersonal skills, information use, applied technology, academic skills. So we're running out of time, so I want to just quickly say the types of teaching strategies that folks use to develop and practice employability skills. You guys have mentioned a lot of them already, and we've seen examples of group and teamwork, especially where you assign folks roles so that they get used to taking different responsibilities and initiative as part of a group. Student surveys and polling, where students are fashioning questions and asking information. Pro and con debate, some of you have mentioned that, as well as scenario-based and case-based learning and online research and presentations. So I'm going to just leave us with the link to those resources now. In order to get some of the tools we used in the presentation, as well as a lesson planning tool that will help you develop your own and identify your own employability skills, you can go to the College and Career Readiness and Success Center website and download many of the handouts and lesson plans that we used today, that we viewed today. And you can also watch this recorded webinar that will be posted on the CalPRO site to go back and take a closer look at some of the slides. So I really want to thank you guys, and I hope that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I'm going to turn it back to Marion.
Thanks, Amy. That was great. A lot of information quickly. You can see the link when we close the webinar. It's going to take you, it should take you right to the evaluation. It will open up in a different window, so you might have to look through your tabs to find it. But please fill out the evaluation, and on the top of your screen where you have the raising your hand, if you click on that drop-down arrow, you'll see at the bottom is applause. So let's give Amy a round of applause. She did a great job on this webinar. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Okay, have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you at the next CalPRO webinar.